Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? They do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment, for even the very wise cannot see all ends. Welcome back, everybody, to the Prairie Podcast. My name is Andrew Weeb. It's wonderful to have you with us here today. No matter where you're listening in from, whether you're a student here at the school, a community member, an alumni, a parent of the student, somebody just checking out Prairie, you found us by accident, whoever you are, we're excited to have you with us today as we continue into part 2 of Tolkien and his themes of theology, as we're discussing this with Dr. Jim Neumann here with us today. We're really excited to dive into some of our topics today. But before we do that, to help us get a little grounded, maybe grounded into the immaterial, a question I have for Jim and myself is, if you could live anywhere, we're going to stick to just Lord of the Rings, Middle Earth. If you could pick up and move and live in one spot, where would it be?
Yeah, it's a hard question because I would take almost any of those spots except for Mordor, but
Yeah,
or like the Dead Marshes or something. But no, I think for me probably Rivendell.
interesting.
Um,
Yeah.
I it's the one I'm most drawn to, and I mean, and there's so many great ones. I mean, the Shire's great, Minas Tirith, Lothlorien, but I think Rivendell is my favorite.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good one. It's this little haven away, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's part of what strikes me about it, and um, love the depiction of it in that Peter Jackson did. I mean, based on some of the um, who was that? Was that Alan Lee's art? But
Yes. Yep.
yeah, where it's just sort of. I mean, it's literally built out of the side of a mountain, with a big, huge waterfall right there, and it's just perfection for me. So.
Okay. Interesting. I think that's a great choice. I think it'd be a wonderful place to stay. For myself, it's a tough choice again, because each have their little perks. If I was younger and you asked, I probably would have said Gondor or something like
Mhm.
that, or maybe I would have hung out with the Rangers, the Dunedain. That would have been fun. I think the older I get, the more I see the beauty in the Shire.
Mm,
Um,
mhm.
I think the older I get, the more I appreciate it because it would be nice just to sit in garden, just read a book. I imagine the peace, no distractions, just talk with friends and garden. That's how I think about it.
Yeah, and that's actually my number 2. If it's not Rivendell, it's the Shire, and for some of the same reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. Well, very good. Well, we'd love to hear your favorite place if you happen to pick up and appear in Middle Earth where you would enjoy hanging around. We'd love to hear that. I think it'd be really cool to see that. Last week, we talked a lot about evil and good,
Mhm.
right? Yeah.
Mhm.
And we talked about how evil both represents, from Tolkien's understanding, that Augustinian view of it's actually the absence of or the shadow of good.
Mhm.
And we see that evil cannot create, it can only distort, it can only corrupt, it can only change. There's a privation to it, right?
Mhm.
But then Tolkien also understood that from his experiences, right? He observed that maybe it kind of felt like there was this force of evil. That even though maybe he can understand it, he tied that into his setting, right? And so we see this push and pull of the Manichaeist perspective, the Augustinian. It's very fascinating. But countering that, of course, is the good and the good of the world, that there is a good, there is a hope, there's a light. Um, there's a little bit of that light, and that little bit of light is worth hanging on to. I
Mhm.
think you quoted the fool's hope is
Right,
the
right,
idea of
yeah.
it, right? Of course, tying into that, we then talked about some of his other experiences and how that tied into his theology of the good of creation
Mhm.
and his understanding and his love for God's creation and how valuable that was to him. And so we see that in coming out in his writings, of course, that the creation and the natural world is what's good, but the industrialization and the destruction of it without any regard or care for it is now the form of evil, because it's against what the inerrant good of God's creation was. And I think it was some
Mhm.
fascinating conversation we had there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
certainly. Today that quote I read at the very beginning. It was a quote you shared last episode as one of your favorites,
Mhm.
out of many. It's given by Gandalf right there in the Mines of Moria. and Frodo is kind of talking with Gandalf and about Bilbo, um, potentially, Gollum's following after them, right? And Frodo's kind of like, why didn't Bilbo kill him,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And that's when Gandalf shares about this a little bit, that many deserve death, but they get life, and some deserve life, but they get death. And who are we to be the ones to decide that, basically, right? I think there's some great wisdom. So we're going to touch on these concepts as we continue this conversation of Tolkien's understanding of good and evil, because I think that's what it really breaks down to, and how
Hmm.
that plays out throughout his literature, and we can get to understand his mind a bit more. Uh, One key area, though, that really stands out, at least to me and I think to others, when you read some of Tolkien's work, is you see a lot about friendship,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
There's a good in friendship, and maybe there's an opposite to that as well. So I'm curious to get some of your thoughts on that as we're looking into this, continuing the discussion of kind of this dichotomy of good and evil. And let's begin there. Tolkien's understanding of the fellowship and getting outside of fellowship.
Hmm. Yeah, two really prominent themes in Tolkien are the theme of isolation, which is pretty much always bad in Tolkien, and the antidote to it, sort so to speak, is fellowship or friendship, um, and so one of the ways that we see, we'll start with isolation. One of the ways that we see isolation as a negative thing in Tolkien um, is that pretty much any time you see a character in Tolkien's work who is becoming living increasingly in their own sort of private sphere away from everyone else, the more separated, the more isolated people become. That is either number one, the result of evil in their life, or or it is going to lead to it. And it's
Hmm.
probably actually both. It's sort of isolation and evil, or sin, we could say, are sort of a perpetual vicious cycle in Tolkien's works. And so, a few examples of that. First of all, anytime somebody has the ring. In Tolkien's work, whether it's Gollum or Bilbo or Frodo,
Hmm.
um, it isolates you. The longer you have it, the more isolated you become from everyone around you. And so in Gollum, we see this in the extreme because he possessed the ring for so long. But where does it lead him? It leads him to alienation from his own people from the very beginning, in large part because he murdered his friend to take the ring.
Hmm.
Um, but but then it ultimately leads him to a place where he has no companions, and when Bilbo finds him, is living in a cave in a mountain in the dark, reduced to a life of eating raw fish, and
Hmm.
um, the one treasure that he has is his precious, the ring, and in part because of his impulse to protect that. Um, it's led him into total isolation from everything else and everyone around him. And for Tolkien, this is a picture of what sin actually always does to us. The more we delve into sin, the more we follow a sinful course in our lives, the more isolated we become from the people around us.
Hmm.
And so the flip side of that in Tolkien's literature is this idea that the good of friendship and fellowship. It's not an accident in Tolkien's work that um, Sauron is defeated by a companion, a fellowship of nine um, peoples that are all very different from one another.
Yep.
Um, but they come together, whether men like Aragorn and Boromir, or uh, Legolas and Elf, or a dwarf Gimli, um, or the hobbits, the four hobbits, and then of course Gandalf, who's just kind of in a category of his own. Um, but uh, but they all are unique and have a unique, there is, I mean, there's really is a picture of diversity, diverse giftings, and whatnot there, but they come together in fellowship, and it is their fellowship that takes down the great evil in the world,
Mm.
in many ways. Um, and then maybe, the greatest picture to my mind of the good of friendship in Tolkien is the relationship between Sam and Frodo,
Yeah.
um, captured so well in that line of Sam's as they're climbing up Mount Doom at the end, and Frodo is totally spent and exhausted, feeling the burden of the ring so heavy that he just can't do this anymore. And Sam says, "I may not be able to carry the ring, but I can carry you." And Tolkien, in his private letters to at least one fan that wrote him, um, said that in his mind, Sam is, if there is one if there's one hero above all others in Lord of the Rings, according to Tolkien, it was Sam.
Hmm.
Um, and so, so while sin leads us into isolation from other people, and isolation leads us into further sin, friendship um, and fellowship with one another um, uh, may be the very thing that can overcome it, that can overcome the
Yeah.
evil of the world
Cert-
as human beings.
certainly.
Yeah.
Thinking about this isolation, the friendship, all of that. One character that really stood out that you talked about was Gollum, and he,
Hmm.
even more so, like I think Gollum is this perfect picture of that isolation, what that does to someone, right?
Right.
And you
Right.
can see what happens over a long period of time. I think he's a really key figure for seeing some of that. Um, Another aspect, though, that thinking about the story of Gollum. Um, that quote we talked about, many that live deserve death and some that die deserve life. Uh, this idea of evil and good and the concept of, are we the ones to give it? Are we the ones
Mm-hmm.
to show it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if you could talk a bit about Tolkien's understanding of grace, of pity, mercy, and how that ties in as well to the stories that he wrote.
It's a really powerful theme in all of Tolkien's writings. I mean, you can see it even beyond Lord of the Rings, but just to stick to Lord of the Rings for now, I guess. The we probably Tolkien's theology of pity, if we want to put it that way, probably comes up most strongly in some of the events surrounding Gollum in the story. And as you mentioned earlier, famously in the Mines of Moria, uh, when Frodo first realizes that Gollum has been following them, of course, Gandalf's known it for a while. Um, uh, he remarks at one point that it's a pity that Bilbo didn't kill him when he had the chance, um, and that earns a soft rebuke, a little bit of a reprimand from Gandalf, who
Mhm.
says, pity. It was pity that stayed his hand. Um,
Hmm.
and so, right off the bat, we see him, first of all, correcting Frodo's understanding of what pity is.
Yeah.
Um, we use that word so flippantly sometimes. It's a pity somebody didn't do such and such, and um, but Gandalf highlights, and I think Tolkien is speaking to us through Gandalf here, highlights um, pity as a sort of cardinal virtue, um, one of the highest virtues that we can have, and
Hmm.
um, and the way that he fleshes that out is that, again, he says um, there are many who die who deserve life. Can you give that to them? Well, the obvious answer is no. So then, don't be so quick to deal out death and judgment to others. And in his final comment there, his rationale there is that not even the very wise, not even the wisest of us,
Hmm.
know how things are going to play out in the end. You don't know what the end of that person's story might be, and more importantly, you don't know what role um, they might have in the master plan. I mean, if we're going to speak in Christian terms here, you don't know what role, what purpose that person may yet have in God's plans,
Hmm.
and what He may do through them. Um, and so, uh, yeah, for Tolkien, pity, showing pity, which equates to showing mercy,
Yeah.
um, is akin, I think, to the grace that has been shown to us, um, and as Christians, uh, and and so to exercise pity or mercy towards someone else is basically to be a vehicle of grace,
Hmm.
and to embody the same grace that has been shown to us.
Certainly. Um, and there's the idea that to show grace, to have pity, it's not a weakness, right?
Right,
There's actually great strength in being able
right.
to show grace. It's far easier for us to actually hate. It's far easier for us to strike, to accuse, to beat down, to
Hmm.
be the ones that want to deal the judgment, right? It takes far more strength to hand that over to God and say, no, okay, you're going to be the one, you'll be the one to judge, you'll be the one to figure it out
Hmm.
later, because I actually don't know the master plan. You do. So I'm going to be a vehicle of your grace instead. And, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and some thought there that it's also just not our prerogative. It's not our
Mm,
prerogative to deal out judgment in all these matters, and yeah, so two things: it's not our prerogative, but also we don't know what we're doing, and
mm,
and that's
yeah.
part goes with it not being our prerogative. And so you may think that you're dealing out genuine justice, but um, but you might not be. You might actually be doing more damage than good.
Hmm.
Um, and um, yeah, of all the characters in Tolkien, at least in Lord of the Rings, the one that is most known for pity, the one that is most characterized by pity, is almost certainly Gandalf. Um, Frodo gets there as he goes on. He learns the value of pity more and more, partially through his own experience of suffering with the ring. But Gandalf really is the one who finds value in pity, finds
Mm,
strength in tears. Um, and you can contrast him in that way with Saruman, who has no pity.
yeah.
And he looks at, hobbits as though they're these weak, meaningless creatures, and looks at the world that is, he thinks is um, on an inevitable road to destruction and darkness, and has no pity on it, and instead just decides to join forces with the darkness. Um, and laughs at Gandalf at times for the pity that he has on these sort of weak, puny creatures.
Yeah.
Um, but that is paid back in the end when, um, well, as it turns out, Gandalf was right to see something special in those little
Hmm.
creatures.
Yeah, and they're the ones that end up messing up the plans of the evil of Sauron and Saruman,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's kind of that irony of it. But thinking about that final moment, right, where there was this final moment where all hope seemed to be lost, and we talked about this last episode, this fool's hope, this last little light left over. Um, I think there's something in there as well that we need to cling to, and I'm curious if you could jump into that angle as well when that those final moments when all hope is lost.
Yeah, well, it brings us to one of the just most incredible, one of the coolest ideas, theological ideas in Tolkien's writing, and it's a deeply Christian one. But Tolkien coined this word, eucatastrophe, um, which comes straight from Greek to basically mean good catastrophe. So, a catastrophe, this kind of unlooked for, surprising cataclysmic event that typically is for the worst. I mean, when we think of catastrophes, we think of things like natural disasters or whatever, these things that couldn't be looked for, couldn't be prevented, and usually leave everyone for the worse.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, Eucatastrophe said is just like that, except it's good instead of bad. And so it's this unlooked for, surprising event that never could have been anticipated, never could have been counted on. Um, and yet in it we find um, a cataclysmic turn of events, but a good one, and
Mm.
one that ends up being our salvation. And so he, and we see this at the end of we see this idea come out in the end of Lord of the Rings and the end of Return of the King when um when it comes down to it, when Frodo has reached Mount Doom and he has the opportunity to throw the ring into Mount Doom, um he can't do it.
Mm.
And so there is this sense in which um for all of his success up to that point, at the pivotal moment, Frodo fails. Um, and fails as anyone else would have. And that is the power of the ring. Um, Everyone succumbs to it in the end. Nobody can resist its lure. And so he cannot bring himself to throw it into Mount Doom. And at that moment, it looks like all hope is lost. If
Mm-hmm.
Frodo can't throw the ring into Mount Doom, then everything they fought for, even the great um, victory that was just won on the Pelennor fields, and
Yeah.
it's all for nothing. Um, and um, and there is, and I think Tolkien is showing us there a picture of um, our own inability to overcome sin
Mm.
in our lives. Um, Try as we might, no matter how well intentioned we may be, um, when it comes to it, we lack the strength. We lack the ability um, to do. We just can't do it,
Yeah.
um, and it's in that moment, though, in the story, and that the most unexpected thing um, possible probably happens. I think the only thing more unexpected would be if Sauron himself just said, uh, "Yeah, actually, I've decided that I've been very bad here," and just throws the ring in himself. And
But next to
but
that, yeah.
yeah, next to that, the next most unexpected thing, uh, Gollum, shows up out of nowhere, still after Frodo this whole time, because he's so addicted to his precious, so has to have it. Um, and he shows up, and what's he do? He attacks Frodo, bites off his finger, gets the ring back, like he's always wanted, but falls into Mount Doom with the ring in hand. Um, and he perishes in the flames of Mount Doom, but so does the ring. And so this is what Tolkien means by eucatastrophe. This At the end, the day is saved through the most unexpected and unlikely of possibilities, and it's a hope beyond hope that they never could have counted on.
Yeah.
When Frodo's strength fails, um, and it looks like all is lost, um, by just an unexpected turn of events that they never could have conjured this up. They never could have made this happen if they had, and no matter how hard they had tried.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the day is saved. So for Tolkien, this is sort of just a providential. It's not really. I don't think it's chance, but it's this providential occurrence. Um, that again none of them could have seen coming.
Yeah.
When Gollum inadvertently destroys the ring, um, and so that's the picture in the story of eucatastrophe. Now, Tolkien also said elsewhere that in our story, the real story,
Yep.
he called the incarnation of Jesus Christ, the eucatastrophe of humanity's story. So
Hmm.
the unlooked for grace, the hope beyond all hope, in our story, which was otherwise hopeless, in humanity's story, otherwise hopeless, was that God became one of us, that God became
Yeah.
incarnate in human flesh and entered into the human story, and in doing so, sort of injected saving grace into it.
I think it's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jim, for coming on here and just talking with us. And as we've discussed um, some of Tolkien's perspectives on theology, how we see that in his literature, but also how that can impact us today. That stories and great stories can actually help us break down.
Hmm.
Um, the deep theological truths that God has given to us. That though we may understand them, sometimes they haven't penetrated us in all the
Hmm.
full ways yet. And I think that's why God gave us creativity and imagination
Yeah.
to work these things out, to express the truth in a way that helps us eat it. It's
Yeah.
instead of having this hard substance. Okay, it's okay. We'll cut it up with a fork and knife, and okay, now you can have a little bite here, and you start to understand it a bit more, right? And I think there's great, powerful imagery that we can draw from what Tolkien understood of God's creation, of God's good, the privation of evil,
Hmm.
the importance, the value in pity, mercy, and grace, and how we've received that grace from God, and how we need to live that out because we don't know what's best,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think these are some excellent themes. So I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing with all of us.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, thank you.
yeah.
It's been a delight. Yeah.
Certainly. It's always a delight. And of course, thank you everybody else for tuning in. Hope you learned something new. I hope you had a wonderful time. Of course, I'll expect you back here next week. We're going to have some wonderful new content coming out as we continue to get some wonderful guests on here. Of course, if you want to learn more about Prairie College, I encourage you to head to www.prairie.edu. If you want to come study under Dr. Neumann, he'd be a wonderful person to come study under. You can come take our Bachelor's of Bible and Theology.
Be glad to have you.
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you can hear him talk about this stuff every day.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, make sure you check us out Facebook, Instagram, all the fun spots. Thank you, and thank you.